Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our final webinar of 2024. Well, the last 12 months gone, eh? So today we're going to be talking about financial well-being, and specifically how to track your client's financial well-being. And there's nobody better to be joined by for this than the godfather of financial well-being himself, Mr. Chris Budd. There you go, Chris. What an introduction that is. Chris is the author of the Financial Wellbeing book, the founder of the Institute for Financial Wellbeing, and owner of the Financial Wellbeing Pulse. Welcome, Chris. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Godfather. Good Lord. I feel like I should be sat with a glass of wine in a big chair in Italy somewhere, which I can do. I can do that.
Before we get into that, because this is going to be a nice, easy webinar for me today. You're doing most of it, Chris. But before we get into that, Dan, would you do your usual housekeeping, explain to people how we do this and what we're going to be doing today?
Yeah, of course. Wow, last webinar of the year. That's flown by quickly, hasn't it? You know what they say when you're having fun and all that. So what a way to end our 2024 series of special guests, right? We've got the Godfather himself with us, a cozy fireside chat with Chris Budd around financial well-being. So what do we all need to know? Well, if this is your first Yardstick webinar, and looking in the chat, I think a few people's names don't look very familiar, so it may well be. We encourage as much participation as possible. So don't worry, your microphones and cameras are not on, but you can still talk to us. So how do you do that? Well, send us a comment in via the chat or use the Q&A box to get stuck in. And as always, this is a very safe space. So ask those silly questions, tell us if you agree, or even better, tell us you respectfully disagree. We're all here to learn, so let's all make the most of the hour. And I'll answer a question now that we always get right at the start. Yes, we absolutely are recording today's session. So a video will be sent out along with a summary of any links or resources mentioned, and that will be in your inbox later today. I think that's enough from me. So let's begin. Chris, over to you.
Thank you. Right. Wish me luck in sharing my screen. Can you confirm that you can see what you should be seeing?
Screen share confirmed.
Woohoo! Technical issues overcome. Right. Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to do two parts to this. I'm going to talk to you for a bit about what financial well-being is in the first place, for those of you who are new to it, and a reminder for those who aren't. And then some questions. So do, feel free to check your questions into chat. And then that'll be about 15 minutes or so. And then I'm going to talk about the Financial Wellbeing Pulse and how you can measure your client's financial well-being, or your own for that matter. Lots of questions to come in. Please do. Very happy to be challenged. Very happy to talk about stuff. The email address there, inquiry at thatfinancialwellbeingpulse.com, is also the website. So if you wanted to go and have a look at it, that's the website to look at. Okay, so I've been talking about financial wellbeing for a little while now. Wrote the Financial Wellbeing book that started all this off back in 2015. And then the four cornerstones of financial wellbeing. We've also done 100 and God knows how many, 110 or something episodes of the Financial Wellbeing podcast. You may be aware of the Institute for Financial Wellbeing. If you are not, please come and join, because it's a group of like-minded people who want to make the focus of their advice to be on helping clients to be happier, not just wealthier, which is what this is all about. So please do check out the Institute, come along to the conference, get involved with the conversation. So the four cornerstones of financial well-being, what do I mean by that? Well, the four cornerstones are firstly things that are true of all of us about what makes us happy and our relationship with money. So anybody will feel better if they get a hug from a loved one. That is true of all of us. That is universally true. If you see money as the objective of your life, that will not make you happy. That is also true. Really important to stress right from the outset that none of this is Chris Budd thinks. None of this is, I've been doing this job for 30 years and I know this, that, and the other. This is all backed up by research. Okay, this is all about taking the research from psychology, neuroscience, philosophy, academia, religion. I mean, Buddha's been talking about this for 2,500 years, right? This is not new stuff. This is just taking the existing research about what makes us happy and applying it to the financial planning process. So the first thing is what's true of all of us. The second thing is then what is true of you. So clearly that loved one who's giving us a hug and making us feel better is going to be different for Phil and Dan than it would be for me. Well, at least I hope it would. So finding out what makes you happy within that general truths is what a process I call know thyself. It's about helping your client understand what makes them happy and also understanding some of the things that will stop them being happy. So their behaviors, for example, that they might be exhibiting, which are true of all of us, that get in the way of our own well-being. So there are these behavioral finances become a big thing over the last few years. I think it's a fascinating subject and very deep. But this goes under the left-hand column of what's true of all of us. We also then have things that are true of each of us. Self-limiting beliefs. I'm not worthy of money, or I am worthy of money. Both equally misleading and not helpful to our well-being. So these are the four cornerstones that bring together all of the research, all of the ideas and thinking about what is going to make us happy, and will our financial decisions be increasing or decreasing that. So what are some of these general truths? Well, these are the 5 pillars of financial well-being that we use in the Institute of Financial Wellbeing. Again, stressing all this comes from research. And if you want to know the references, buy the books because they're all in the back. Although you can always drop me a line if you want to know a specific one. I'll be very happy to share it. So just to talk about these very briefly, a clear path to identifiable objectives. Well, that is financial planning, really, isn't it? A clear path, that's your cash flow forecasting, probably. Identifiable objectives is asking the simple question of somebody, what's going to make you happy in the future? There's a line I use about financial planning all the time, which is financial planning is really very easy. You just work out what you want from life and spend your money on that. Dead easy, right? Trouble is, working out what you want from life isn't that easy. The other 4, control over daily finances, these are all fairly obvious stuff, I think, but these have been shown to be the main contributors towards our relationship with money. But the one I want to just touch upon a bit more is that identifiable objectives. What does actually make us happy? What are those general truths? And one of the major contributing factors is having some sort of meaning and purpose in life. Age UK does a survey every year of what older people report as making them happy or unhappy in their older age. And one of the most common comments that comes out is whether they are living a meaningful existence. So if you have somebody, let's say, in or working towards retirement, one of the questions you should be asking them is, what does this mean for you? Where does meaning and purpose come in your life? That doesn't mean, by the way, that everything you do has to be meaningful and purposeful. It's quite okay to sit in the back room and read a book with some nice music on. You know, that's absolutely fine. But if that's all you're doing in retirement, you're probably not going to be as happy as you could be. Having something that gives you some meaning and purpose in life is really important. So, as I always do when I do these talks, I would offer this challenge all the way through. Are you having these conversations with your clients? Are you talking to your clients about where does purpose occur in your world? And where will it in the future? We get to this concept of extrinsic and intrinsic motivations if we get a bit deeper into this. So this comes from something called self-determination theory, which is a psychological theory. And it's about what motivates us to do things. And if we achieve the things that we are motivated to get, then will that make us happy? So an extrinsic motivation is on the left, where you are driving a fancy car in order that people can see you driving a fancy car. So will that make you happy? Well, yes, as long as you're driving down the road and that person is looking at you in that fancy car and admiring you. Once you've gone past them, it's gone, and you now have to find somebody else. So the problem with extrinsic motivations of your happiness coming from other people is that your happiness always is on the other side of somebody else's approval or applause. If instead you have intrinsic motivations, which means you do things that will help other people, which will be probably quite hard to define why it makes you happy, it just does, then it's much more in your control. So I'm not saying that driving a fancy car isn't a good thing to do. There's no judgment here. if that fancy car is something you drive because you love cars, you're a bit of a petrolhead, great. That's probably more intrinsic. But what is really the motivation behind wanting that thing? Is it actually for your own personal joy, or is it for the approval of others? Again, are these questions you're asking your clients? Now, money can actually get in the way of this. There was an experiment done, if I remember rightly, Elizabeth done in Canadian University, where they got they put an advert out saying blood donors needed, and they got lots of people emailing saying, yep, happy to help. They then separated those or moved them into 3 different categories. One category, they emailed back and said, see you on Wednesday at 10. By the way, there's no money in this. The second category, they said, see you on Wednesday at 10. By the way, if you turn up, we'll give you $50. And the third category, they said, see you on Wednesday at 10. If you turn up, we'll give $50 to charity. The lowest turnout on Wednesday at 10 o'clock was from the group they offered $50 to. Second was the charity, and the highest turnout was those they said there's no money. And the reason for that is because giving blood is a purposeful thing. You don't give blood in order to make some money, generally speaking. Most people do it because it feels like a good thing to do. And once they offered money, it actually got in the way of that and prevented people from turning up. Just a little example of how important having purpose and meaning in life is, and how it gets in the way of good financial decisions. Are you having these conversations with your clients? I want to touch on something called set point theory, which is a theory of happiness, which I think is so revealing to our relationship with money. This theory says that we go through life with a set level of well-being. It's set by the time you get to your adult life, and it doesn't tend to change. So that's the blue line. It might change. It is possible to change it over time, but it tends to revert back. So what happens if we can use the words well-being for long-term and happy and sad for kind of in the moment short-term? If something happens and makes us feel happy, then we go above our set point. That is what being happy is. So that's the orange line. But we get used to that feeling of being happy. You're not always happy. So we revert back down to our set level. Then something might happen, watch the news, feel a bit sad, you go down below. But you then get used to that feeling, or you forget about what you've watched, and you revert back to your set point. So we oscillate around our set point as we go through life. That is how happiness works. But long term, our well-being doesn't tend to change. Now, the question that might come to you is, where does that happiness come from? How is your level of long-term level of well-being and my long-term level of well-being different? The research would suggest that it's 50% built into you. By the time you get to adult life, that is it. It's set. It's in your DNA. 10% of your long-term level of well-being comes from your circumstances. That means your job, where you live, how wealthy you are, etc. But 40% of our long-term well-being comes from what's called our intentional activity. What we say, what we do, how we act, how we react, our relationship with money. So this made me realize when I first saw this, we've been looking in the wrong place. Financial advice, if we're only advising people on their 10%, we're not advising on the thing that's going to make them happier. We should be advising them on their 40%, on their financial well-being, their relationship with money. If you do a brilliant job with somebody and you increase their wealth by 50%, their circumstances, then you're actually only increasing their overall long-term well-being by 5%. If you also work with them on their relationship with money and you increase that by 50% as well, then you can increase their overall well-being by 25%. So financial well-being should be the focus of financial advice and financial planning. So we should be educating people not about their money, but about their relationship to money, the 40%, not just the 10%. And that really is what financial well-being is. It's the study of the relationship between money and happiness. So it's not just about managing debt, budgeting, etc. It is a bit of that. Control of daily finances, remember, was one of the 5 pillars, but it's a much broader topic of the study between relationship between money and happiness. Dan, I'll stop there. Over to you. Any questions? Any thoughts from anybody?
Phil, I think you've got a question at the moment, haven't you?
Yeah. Chris, just talk to us about, because there's a few of us on this call that are a bit long in the tooth in financial services. Yeah. Just talk about, if you'd given this presentation 10 years ago about financial well-being, yeah, and then 15 years ago, yeah, I suspect it would have got a very, very different reception. Just talk a little bit about how financial well-being has become central to some firms' propositions and how you see it might continue in the future.
Yeah, okay. For me, it is most definitely the direction of travel. So that's a phrase that I would like to use. Is it the norm? No. But it is very common. And what's going to happen is that as people, as in customers over the next decade, experience somebody talking to them about their lives, not just about their money, and about what makes them happy, then you don't go back. You know, you're not going to go back to your old advisor or a different advisor who just says, I'm just going to talk about investment performance. That's not, once you've had that, it's out the box. So that's one point. There is another way of answering that question, Phil, is what's the first small steps people can take? Because it can feel quite overwhelming at times. Financial well-being proposition in its entirety, which I help firms put into place, can be all-encompassing and mean entirely redesigning your whole process, which not everybody wants to do, to be honest. So if I could illustrate this with one point, if there's one thing that I would like people to do differently, it's to shut up. So when they're in a meeting with a client and they ask the objectives question, you know, what's the objective? What do you want from your future? And the client answers the question, don't speak for 1 minute. And it's going to be really awkward because the client's going to answer the question and they're looking at you expectingly and they're going to say, I want to retire at 62. And you're going to get to smile at them benignly and just look at them. And they're going to feel awkward and you're going to feel awkward. And then 30 seconds will go by and you feel really awkward. And then after 45 seconds, the client will say, well, I say 62. I mean, I'd love to retire at 50. And they will start talking. And they will start talking about what they really want out of life. Get out of their way. Let them go, you know. And that is financial well-being, because what they're now talking about is not their money. What they're now talking about is their lives and what will make them happy, that know thyself stuff. But we don't tend to have a very safe space in life to talk about this stuff. And financial advisors, in my experience, usually are too eager to give their solutions and not create the space for the clients to open up and truly talk and explore. So that 10, 15 years ago was where I started. So I trained to be a business coach and diploma qualified business coach. And I started using those skills in client meetings and just saw everything open up and change. So that is a really good first step for people. Does that answer your question, Phil?
Yeah, I think so. And it's that saying, isn't it? There's power in the pause. And I saw a brilliant presentation. I think it was recorded, so maybe you can people can on this call can reach out to them. There was a brilliant presentation a couple of weeks ago at the CATS conference, Compliance and Training Solutions, CATS conference in London, from a lady called Becca Timmins, who did a brilliant 40 minutes on active listening. It was absolutely superb, and it plays into exactly what you said there. One more question from me to you, Chris. What are the benefits to both clients and firms of following this approach? Twin benefits to clients and firms, because I suspect a few people on this call and in the wider financial services space might be able to answer the first question more easily, benefits to clients, as opposed to benefits to their firm and them as planners.
I'm going to give you some statistics on this in a minute. The benefit to clients is transformational. I do get a lot of firms, or I have had over the last 7 or 8 years, saying, oh, we already do this. No, you don't. And that's the honest truth is, I've got to be blunt, no, you don't. We listen to clients, great, good quality financial planning is halfway here. But if you add this extra bit about the general truths, about educating people about what makes them happy, you add a whole extra layer, which is transformational. And I can tell you many, many, many stories, there's loads of them in the books, of clients, not just of me, but of other people who have had complete life changes. Now, that doesn't mean to say that everybody has to have a life change. And I want to dial that down a little bit. We kind of see tweets or whatever on social media about kind of tears in the meeting room and people feeling really, chuffed because they've made a client cry. Now, that's not a good thing. But it is or can be transformational when you encourage people to think and understand and learn about the things that will make them happy. It's changed my life. No doubt about that whatsoever, that understanding the principles of what will make me happy in life has changed my life. I'm much less worried about impressing people on social media these days. And I much more enjoy that thing of sitting reading a book and listening to some music at home. As for the firm, there's loads of advantages, and I'll touch on some of them in a second about how good it is for loyalty and client retention, all that kind of. But I would actually just focus on one other thing. It's fun. It's a really fun way of doing the job, because you have such deeper conversations with clients and you see much greater impact on their lives. It's really enjoyable. And it's a really interesting subject as well. So, yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Do you want to share your screen and move into the second half of this? Now we've whetted everybody's appetite for delivering this kind of service.
Okay, boss.
I'm liking that. The Godfather's calling me boss. I'm liking that.
What does that make you then?
I don't know, actually.
Hang on, I've managed to mess this up. I'm not currently sharing, am I?
No, you're not, Chris.
How long have we been doing this now? Oh, I still can't get it right.
Thank you, Paul. The great Godfather. I'll go with that. Makes me sound really old, though, Paul. But yeah, we'll go with that. Have you got them, Chris?
There we go. I minimized you by mistake.
So what Chris is highlighting here is the power of the pause.
Oh dear. How's that?
Yeah, they're coming up.
Hey!
Brilliant. Well
Right.
done.
I just thought I'd leave a little minute or so for reflection for everybody there. Right. So the financial wellbeing pulse. This is the culmination of many years of work for me, where I have been trying to find a way to measure our relationship with money. And by relationship with money, I'm talking about the stuff that I've just been talking about. I'm not talking about whether somebody's got enough life insurance, etc., or not. It's about their feelings and relationship with money, which could then reveal that they don't have enough life insurance. But it's not a factual thing. It's a relationship thing. It has been designed by myself through the Institute for Financial Wellbeing, an organization called the Centre for Thriving Places. Those of you who have been to some financial wellbeing things may have come across Liz Zeidler before. Also a guy called Professor Sam Wren Lewis, a professor of philosophy. Centre for Thriving Places have been running something called their Happiness Pulse. You can go online right now and do it. Don't, please, do that in half an hour. But you can go and do the Happiness Pulse and find out how happy you are. Centre for Thriving Places have been measuring happiness and well-being for over a decade. So I have been working with them to take their general well-being set of questions, which forms part of my pulse, and adding on some specific financial well-being questions. So there's 30 or so questions in total. Around half of them are about your general well-being and half of them the Centre for Thriving Places. And also with fantastic support from Aegon, who have been amazing supporters of the Institute for Financial Wellbeing from the outset, and particularly Dr. Tom Mathar, who was very much involved with the methodology behind the Pulse. Coming back to your question, Phil, Aegon have done lots of research with the IFW about this, whether people actually want this sort of stuff. And one of the stats I pulled out was that 81% of clients said that they would like to be asked about life objectives, but only 31% of advisors said that they thought that it was important. So there's a disconnect here between what clients want and what advice is giving them. And that is going to be a propulsion of this direction of travel that in a decade, I am absolutely certain that everybody or most people will be talking about financial well-being or happiness in some way or another. I mean, really, what's the point of financial advice if it's not focused on making people happier? What is the point? Another report from Aegon looked at the most important attributes of advisors as far as clients were concerned. And investment management was there, but only 42% of them put it in their top 5. So if you're only talking to clients about, or mainly talking to clients about investments, that's not what most of your clients want. I can remember me doing the job 20 years ago, going around with my investment pack, talking through benchmarking for individual funds. Oh my God, how boring. Poor clients of me 20 years ago. And one day I decided I just wasn't going to do that anymore. And I went for that next year, I went to every review meeting with my pack and I say, would you like me to talk you through this? And I think 3 people said, yes, please. So it's just not what people are wanting. They want to talk about their lives. That's why you go to a financial advisor, financial planner. One of the major reasons why the pulse that I'm pushing the pulse big time is consumer duty, because consumer duty requires you to demonstrate the impact of your advice, and that has been, I think, probably the biggest scratching of the head that has been created by consumer duty. How do we demonstrate the impact of our advice? And that is what the pulse is going to enable. So what is it? We have a bunch of questions. It's a survey in simple terms. It's an online survey with a whole lot of general well-being questions, and then 3 sets of questions around financial well-being. The first is about your competence with money. The second is about your values. And then the third is a kind of what that ends up meaning for your relationship to money. Okay. The idea is that this generates a score and it generates a conversation. So let me just give you some examples of some of those questions. In the first section, the financial competence, there's things like I feel on top of my day-to-day finances, and I feel able to influence my long-term financial situation. Now, what I like about these questions, and by the way, there's one of my favorite phrases or quotes is from Blaise Pascal, a French philosopher, who said, I'm sorry I wrote you such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a shorter one. To get these questions looking this simple took a long time, and there's a lot of academic rigor behind every word in these questions. We have a full methodology report which explains all the thinking behind this stuff. So this is one of the major things about the pulse, is the academic and philosophical research behind these questions. Financial values. How I spend my time is much more important to me than how much money I have. And people are going to answer strongly agree, strongly disagree on a scale of 1 to 7. My self-worth doesn't depend on my financial position. Now, what are you going to say to a client who has said strongly disagree to that last point? My self-worth doesn't depend on my financial position, strongly disagree. We know, go back to those intrinsic and extrinsic motivations, that would suggest that their self-worth depends on the approval of other people. So that means their self-worth is something that they are always having to be chasing. That's probably not going to be making them very happy. So that opens you up for conversation, for discussion in your meeting. It also opens you up for potentially sharing some financial wellbeing theory through your newsletters. Phil's going to come on and talk about some of this stuff about how you market financial wellbeing, the financial wellbeing guides that we've produced for Yardstick that you can buy. All of this stuff. If you've got lots of clients who are strongly disagreeing with that last point, this opens the way for conversations. And then financial well-being, my financial situation enables me to enjoy my everyday life and enables me to spend time with those I care about. Now, I really particularly like these because my financial situation enables me to enjoy my everyday life. There's 2 ways of, if the answer to that is strongly disagree, there's 2 ways of solving that. One, you could argue, is have more money, get a better paid job. But maybe it also could be about changing your relationship to money so that you do enjoy your everyday life, or understanding where that enjoyment comes from, that education on well-being, not just on the money. And I'm not suggesting it's one or the other, by the way. It's a combination of the 2, and getting that right is what financial planning with a well-being bent is. So I'll just explain, before I move on to the next one, I'll just explain then how it works. What happens is you're going to see a client for a new client or a review, and you send them a link. You get a dashboard, and you send the client a unique code. So that is a code that we can't see. So GDPR, it's completely anonymous as far as we're concerned, but you can allocate it to specific clients, so you can see which client is which. You send the client a code, they complete the pulse. They get a report, which I'll show you a rough draft of in a second. They get a report which says your financial well-being score is, let's say, 55%. So you get a number. They get a general happiness score and they get a financial well-being score. The client also gets a short report explaining what that means, what they've answered, and what that might mean. Now, this is non-judgmental. We're not wagging fingers and saying, you seem to be wanting to be rich. That's not going to help. That's not the idea here. That's not a very helpful approach. It's simply to be pointing out areas that they have said that they may wish to consider, what the research tells us, and therefore what they may wish to think about further. So it's a facilitation to conversation and thinking. The advisor gets a copy of the report, and the client then comes along for the meeting. And let's say you get out, like I used to do my investment pack. The client's going to say, actually, do you know what? Can I not talk about investments this time? Because I've got this thing that's telling me how happy I am. Can we talk about that? A year later, the advisor comes back for the next meeting. Let's say it's an annual review meeting. You go through it again. Client goes through the report. Your financial well-being is 65%. You can now say to the client, we have increased your financial well-being, your relationship with money by 10 points. That is as a result of our advice. That's really powerful stuff. That's demonstrating the impact of your advice. The firm gets a dashboard, so you can average these scores across all clients. For larger firms, you can drill down per advisor, as well as per client, but you can get an aggregate score. So now you can say, as a firm, we increase the financial well-being of our clients by an average of 10 basis points, which you can give to the FCA for Consumer Duty to demonstrate the impact of your advice. You can also use it for marketing purposes, but I'll leave that to the expert to explain how. So the impact, the other thing that's going to happen that is kind of almost a Trojan horse, because that Consumer Duty impact is such a massive deal that I almost kind of tempted to stop there. But I think we probably have a receptive audience here, because going back into that meeting, the clients come along with their report. You've got a copy of it. You've got a conversation now. You've got a conversation to be having. You've got an agenda for your meeting to be talking about the client's life and their objectives and what their financial planning might look like and what your cash flow is aiming for. And is it actually aiming for the things that are going to make you happier? And should we do some scenario modeling? You've got some more fees to be generated here. You've got more conversations to be having. Your whole relationship with your client has just opened up. And we've been in soft testing mode for a wee while now, and the firms that are using it are saying that is exactly what's been happening. So the client gets a report. This is obviously ipsum lorem, so this is just an early mock-up, but it tells them what they answered and what that therefore might mean to them. This is what Consumer Duty says, that consumers are equipped to make good decisions and the firm's products and services should be fit for purpose. What does fit for purpose mean? Well, surely it's examples of what clients expect. And going back to that earlier statistics, clients want to talk about this stuff. So as I say, I have lots of firms who say, and lots of people who say, oh, I do this stuff already. Okay, great. Prove it. Prove that you are helping clients to be happier. How do you prove that? There is no way. That's what the Financial Wellbeing Pulse does. It costs £25 a month, £100 setup fee. The way it's structured is you get 100 uses, and that's 100 clients for multiple uses. So if you have 150 clients who are couples, let's say, that's probably maximum most firms would have, I would imagine, per advisor, then 100 uses is probably going to do you for all your clients, because not everybody's going to want to do this. That then will enable you to retest. So that 100 uses is 100 clients, as many uses per client as you want. So you can see this is set at a pricing level that is dirt cheap. Why have I set this at a pricing level that's dirt cheap? Honestly, financial well-being for me, I'm not doing this to make loads of money. I'm doing this to have impact and to change the market. If it takes off and tens of thousands of people are using it, well, that's fantastic, and I make lots of money. I'm not going to complain, but that is not my purpose. My purpose is and has been for a long time to try and change the focus of financial advice in the UK to be around happiness, not just money. So it's deliberately set at an extremely low price point to try and get market impact so that people like you will have a go at it, thinking, well, it's not exactly a lot of money. I could try it out for 6 months and see how I get on with it. If anybody is a bigger firm that's listening to this, then there are discounts for multiple licenses, and much bigger firms, we can have a chat about making something bespoke. We've got lots of developments planned in the future, things like white labeling and making, put your logo on the reports and stuff like that. All of that stuff is possible. That's me.
Chris,
Thank you, Chris.
I've got a question from Lucy on the service, if you could answer that just now. So Lucy asks, does the license include general guidance on dealing with outcomes from certain questions? Or, for example, say when someone's score has decreased?
It doesn't. No, that license money is just to use the pulse. For that kind of stuff, I would suggest come along to the IFW. Because those sort of conversations are what are being having on in the IFW all the time with people, or call me. I'm always happy to give people half an hour free time. Developments like that are things that I'm interested in looking at over the next few years, the guides and etc. But we have a couple of guides already, which I suspect Phil was going to mention. So yeah, no, not specifically, but there are ways that we can sort that out and we can help.
Thank you, Chris. Right, I am now going to share my screen. And Dan, can you see that?
I can, yeah.
Brilliant. So I want to talk about how we can use this or how firms on this call can use the financial wellbeing pulse in their marketing. And that's because there are clearly huge benefits to both the client and the financial planner and planning firm of using the financial wellbeing pulse, both in terms of proving the outcomes and how you help clients, consumer duty, etc., etc. But as I was talking to Chris when we were putting this webinar together, and he was talking to me about the financial wellbeing pulse, it became clear that there's huge benefits and many, many ways that we can use the outcome and the results of the pulse in your marketing. And the penultimate slide that Chris pulled up was talking about prove it in big highlighted green words. And that really leads beautifully into this slide, where I started by talking about showing beats telling. And so many firms in their marketing tell prospective clients, tell prospects about the value of working with them. Very few firms actually show people the value of working with them, and showing always beats telling. So Chris talked about proving it. I'm talking about showing beats telling. We end up in the same place. And I think the financial wellbeing pulse, along with things like client testimonial videos, online ratings and reviews, client survey results, all of that sort of stuff. And it's what I call client-generated social proof. Comes under that heading of showing beats telling. So for me, this is just another form of, or can be seen in this context, the marketing context, as client-driven social proof. So how would I use it? If you engage with Chris and you start putting the financial wellbeing pulse into your planning process, the first thing I would be doing is I would be discussing the benefits of using the pulse anywhere you talk about the financial planning journey. So your website will probably have a journey page on there. This is the process you take clients through. Talk about the pulse on there, because again, that demonstrates that actually the journey just isn't you're actually paying attention to the outcomes of the journey. It's not simply the journey itself. You're showing people that actually you're investing in tech that shows that the journey is working, and there's meaningful change coming out of the journey. So talk about it on your website. Talk about it in other marketing that you do. So blogs about financial well-being. If you buy any of the guides, and we'll get Abby to put links to those guides in the follow-up email. But if you buy any of those guides that we've done with Chris on financial well-being, talk about it in those guides. We can add that in. Talk about it in the blogs that you write. Talk about it in the social posts. People talk about financial well-being, but prove it. Prove that you're committed to improving your clients' happiness, and demonstrating that you are by using the pulse. So wherever you talk about financial well-being, talk about the pulse and how you use it. And that then means you can use this as a differentiator in your marketing. Chris, you talked about, if that's the financial universe of advisors and planners, narrow it down to those that do financial well-being, and then narrow it down to those that use the pulse. You get to a smaller number. So firms can use this as a differentiator in their marketing. And you can also, over time, as you get clients completing this, and this takes time, and clearly it takes an effort to get clients to complete the pulse, because we need as large a data set as possible. But over time, I could see how firms could anonymize the data and demonstrate the improvement that you've helped clients achieve in their financial well-being. And firms could come up with a financial well-being score for their clients at 1 point, one fixed point. Then in the future, look at another fixed point 12 months on, and show the change, demonstrate the change. Could be used in anonymized case studies as well. Hell, clients are happy to appear in testimonial videos and talk about the effects of financial planning. How cool would it be in a testimonial video for a client to mention the score that they had on Pulse when they started working with the planner, and the score that they had in 12 months' time? And so for me, let's use the data either on an individual level in your marketing or an anonymized as a group. I think there's some massive benefits there. And then finally, celebrate the successes, and celebrate a client who came to you with Chris, what did you talk about? A financial well-being score of 50%. 12 months' time, it's at 75%. Celebrate that in your marketing. Clearly, you've got to ask clients permission to do this. But I just think there's masses you can do from a marketing perspective to build on the other brilliant reasons for using this. And I've only kind of scratched the surface with the ways the pulse can be used in marketing your firms. But those are some basic ideas to whet your appetite. I feel a blog coming on. I'll probably write about this. So let's say 4 or 5 ways to whet your appetite of the ways that it can be used in your marketing, which isn't the main purpose, but is a nice, what we got there, cherry on the top of the cake. Dan, I can see some questions coming in.
They've all been answered. So Madeline was asking about a promotion that Chris has got going on at the moment, where if you join the IFW, you get the first month of Pulse free. So for anybody interested in that, Chris has put a little message in the chat there with an email address. So take him up on his mention earlier as it's not about him making loads of money. Get that first month free from Chris, and get some Pulse with your clients.
Brilliant. And Chris, just tell people one last time what they should do if they want to get their hands on the Pulse.
So the website, financialwellbeingpulse.com, has got all that you need to get to sign up. It's got the pricing on it. It's got some FAQs on it, etc., etc. And there's also got a how to sign up on it. So you can sign up through that website. I will then send you a guide of what to do. There's also some videos and training videos of how to use it and how to set it up. It takes a short bit of time to set the thing up, not a great deal. Yeah, and that's it. It's dead easy, really is.
Chris, we've had two similar questions through actually. Is there a discount for existing IFW members for Pulse?
Yes, same thing, same code. Yeah. So
Perfect.
just message me and I'll send you a code.
Lovely. Thanks, Chris.
Yes, Chris. Right. Before we go, our last webinar of 2024. And as it's our last, we do this every year. We want to get a bit of feedback from you guys on how we've done this year. Now, as you know, this year has been different with our webinars. While we've done some of the educational webinars, when myself, Dan and Abby have been talking about various marketing topics, we've already had some fantastic guests as well. So the first guest of the year was Rory Sutherland. Final guest of the year is Chris Budd. And in the middle of the year, we've had people like Ross Simmons, Phil Agnew, Marcus Sheridan, and a bunch of others. So we've done things a bit differently this year. And we want to get your feedback as to how we've done and what you'd like us to do next year. So we've just put together a few short questions. Dan's going to put the link in the chat. If you guys could pop and we're finishing a little bit early today, so you've got 14 minutes of your life back. If you could use 5 of those just to complete that short survey, so we can make these webinars even better next year, we'd really appreciate that, guys. So that's where we are, 2024. That's our final webinar done. There's the reminder of contact details for both the Financial Wellbeing Pulse and Yardstick. If you want to go and follow Chris on LinkedIn, you want to go and follow me on LinkedIn, there are the details as well. We will send all this out later on today. Abby will. Me and Dan are going near it. Abby will do that later on today. You can watch Chris back. Go and have a look at the financialwellbeingpulse.com. If you've got any questions, go and message Chris as well. Chris, I'm sure you'll be happy to answer those. Other than that, Dan, unless we've got anything else, that's a wrap for 2024.
No, not at all. Yeah. Thanks, guys. See you next year.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.